And so what we tried to do was to look at the universal principles that shape the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the universal human rights principles and other labor rights that are enshrined in the ILO's range of labor market conventions, and say, could we find a way to develop a tool that would enable any national business leader to, we think in 2 hours, in consultation with leaders across the company from technology and procurement and property and customer care and of course HR, to get a sense of where they stand against these universal principles. So the tool as it stands now has 47 questions, divided into 4 sections, because another reason we did this is there's always been confusion in so many of the instruments that the private sector are asked to use between what is required if you're going to deliver equal opportunities, treating people equally, recruiting people on a basis of equal, and what was culture change, and what was to do with customers, and of course, what was to do with corporate responsible citizenship, if you like. And we're confident that it will enable the national business leaders to see where they stand, take stock of where they need to make progress. They can then share that information with companies locally, should they choose to do so, because of course this is a confidential tool, and perhaps through the business disability networks that Jürgen mentioned, as a collective, spot where they're all coming short. None of us have got it right on property, so perhaps we develop a tool that enables our members in Kenya or wherever to actually get a more consistent approach to creating the accessible built environment that is win-win for everyone. There's another aim here, of course, which is absolutely crucial, which is that multinationals should be able to use it to ask, say, 50 of the countries in which they operate to do it locally, and then it will, in effect, tell the national business leaders where the gaps are, what they need from head office if they're actually going to be able to drive consistent, fair, and sensible treatment of people with disabilities worldwide. We're not pretending that those 47 questions are the answer, but they give an indication to someone who's paying attention of where further work, further detail is required. And I think for me, I'd like to stress 2 particular strengths. What we see with existing indexes, if you like, or benchmarks, or whatever they might be called, is that it's not clear what is actually required if you're going to treat people with disabilities fairly, equally, versus what's nice to have and helpful, for example, having an ERG, an employee resource group for people with disabilities, always very helpful. So we've made a very clear distinction between the basics, we call it the fundamentals, which is how you make the adjustments, how you've got people responsible for being barrier-free for groups and adapting for individuals, which is how you treat disabled people equally. And then we move into the kind of things you can do and should do in terms of culture change, which we know are really important. Always learning directly from people with disabilities, whether they're colleagues or customers or community stakeholders, absolutely essential. The second thing we did that I think is quite different, and certainly was a first for the ILO, is we added questions about your approach to being barrier-free and welcoming customers with disabilities. I think this has been an area where those involved in economic empowerment have missed a trick in the past. One, it captures the attention of some people in a business to talk about customers who might regard anything to do with disability as naturally belonging to a junior diversity manager. This starts to position this in the context of business priorities. And I think I'd like to add to that before we finish. We also saw the need for organizations of persons with disabilities with an interest in influencing business, or the NGOs that get funding to help people with disabilities into employment, to get a consistent view of what is reasonable to expect from a company, because often they've got little experience of the reality of working inside a business. And so we see this as building the business confidence of the disability sector, as well as building the disability confidence of the business sector. So we would encourage anyone who is working with a company, helping them to improve their disability performance, to use this tool so that both sides of the table get a better understanding of what is realistic, what is required, and what is really helpful when you're trying to shift cultures.